if you end up with two words, if only. If only I had interviewed my grandmother who lived to be 103 years old. It turned out that I spent 10 years looking for the information she could probably have given me in a half an hour. I was born in Montreal in 1933. My father and mother were from Montreal and New York. Their parents came to the United States early in the 1890s. I have two sisters and my late brother, Arthur Diamond. In high school, I was always interested in sports. Played basketball, track and field, played soccer, and at the same time I was playing softball, or ultimately became fastball, here in Montreal. That was really my second life, playing sports. My first life, I would say, was when I went on to Harvard Business School in 1956. My third life, of course, was work, being in the ceiling business, selling decorative metal ceiling systems all over the world. I ended up by visiting more than 50 countries, spending a lot of time in Europe, the Middle East, a little in Africa, South America, and in the United States as well. So I had an opportunity to travel widely and to meet people from every background. My fourth life was the discovery of Jewish family history. I've always had an interest in my family history. My mother was one of 14 children, my father was one of 7, and I knew relatives, cousins by the dozens. Then I decided that one day I was going to find out more about my family. And in 1977, our family learned that our nephew, my nephew, Mark Diamond, carried the Beta Thalassemia genetic trait.
Beta Thalassemia is a form of hereditary anemia. It's the most prevalent genetic disease in the world. It is unusual in Jewish families in Northern Europe and in Poland, for example. And Stanley has a mutation that we know to be shared only within his family and not described in any other family on Earth.
The danger lies in the offspring of carriers marrying, and when two carriers marry, there's a 1 in 4 chance of the disease, Thalassemia Major, which at that time was more or less fatal, and they still don't have anything more than blood transfusions as being the major way in maintaining the life of a carrier of Thalassemia Major. And that's what is of great consequence to me and was the driving force in my deciding to look and find distant branches of my family that carry the trait and warn them of the fact that they carry the trait.
As far as Stanley's reaction when I first spoke to him, I think it was more of, do I have it? Tell me more about it. He's an inquisitive kind of guy, so it was more of a, what's this all about? It wasn't really the start of genealogy, it was more of a, what's happening here? Do I have it? Who else in the family has it? And that was really the starting point. And then from there, things evolved.
Knowing that my family carried the beta thalassemia trait was one thing. Finding out where it came from was another. And so the quest was on. In order to really find out and go back in history, I needed access to the records in Poland. I was very fortunate that at a conference in 1994, I met Professor Skowronek, the Director General of the Polish State Archives, who expressed a desire to help me in any way he could further my quest. 1 year later, Michael Richman, a lawyer from Washington with whom I share the same interest in our town in Poland, Ostrow Mazowiecka, he and I went to Poland. We spent 2 weeks running from archive to archive, and at the end of our 2 weeks, I had identified approximately 15 additional family branches that I needed to research in order to find possible carriers of the trait. In February of 1996, I returned to Poland, and I was very excited to be able to present to Professor Skowronek a copy of the indices of Ostrow Mazowiecka from 1826 to 1896. This really took them by surprise. They knew I was interested. They knew that I was determined. But to receive a book of this nature impressed them. It prompted me to ask a question, gee, wouldn't this be wonderful if we could do this for other towns in Poland? I remember Professor Skowronek looking over his glasses at me and saying, well, I don't think it's our policy to allow this. But let's start with a few towns and see how it goes. I spent a week cranking a microfilm reader, looking at all these films without success. And it came to my mind at the end of the week that this was ridiculous. I was probably reinventing the wheel. I was repeating what so many other Jewish genealogists had done before. Cranked the same microfilms, looking at the same records. So it struck me that there had to be a better way. And that's what really changed everything for me and for many others when it comes to research in Poland. It wasn't until I got to Poland that the idea of actually indexing the records became a reality. And so the two came together, and Jewish Records Indexing Poland was born. JRI Poland is a massive Jewish vital records indexing project. We've indexed more than 2.2 million records so that you and I and everyone else interested in their Polish roots can go to the internet, put in their town name, put in their family name, up comes a list of all the records for their town to start them off in their research. At every step of the way, each time we talked about a different aspect of the project with the Polish State Archives, their answer was more or less the same. Let's see how we can work together. They understand the need of Jewish people to find their families, to find their family connection, to learn who might have died in the Holocaust, to learn who may have survived. And I think that that is what is really indicative of this project, the cooperative level of enthusiasm, of helpfulness, of desire to see something accomplished that has permeated every aspect of this project. I know that every day, somebody somewhere has an exciting breakthrough. And I get emails all the time with the thanks and the appreciation, and that really drives me as well. It's a lot of fun to know that you've made a difference in somebody's life, just as many people have made a difference in my life.
He gets involved in things, and he attacks things with a passion which is quite unbelievable. He has the ability, because he's working that hard, to draw other people in. So I think the combination of the personal passion and the desire to help other people in the genetic aspects of it really has driven him a lot. Stanley is Stanley, and he tends to look at wider pictures.
It's the same passion he had when he was in business. I mean, he does everything with his whole being. I mean, he just knows no boundaries in that. And he finds it as fascinating as I do. And since we can't talk to people who aren't genealogists because their eyes glaze over after about 30 seconds, including my children, we fortunately can talk to each other. We understand what the other one is doing. I can tolerate a man who sits at the computer from 8 o'clock in the morning till 1 o'clock in the morning. And he can tolerate me doing my own thing without having to... I mean, we meet for lunch and supper, but that's about it. In the 90s, we heard that a notary by the name of Drouin had photographed all the vital records of the province of Quebec. And we were able to buy the films that contain Jewish records. And when we got them, we knew that they had been indexed. So we thought, hey, we have the index, we have it all, we're done. Until we started to look and found that most of the indexes were illegible, some were missing. So since somebody had to do it, and my kids have left, and I don't have much else on my plate, I figured this is mine. And I've gone through them now 4 times. Each and every record is about 76,000. This way we can put them in order, put them online, and that's why I'm doing this. And also it keeps me, off the street.
For me, the most important thing I can think of is making sure that the information I've accumulated and that the work that I've been doing in the general genealogical world will continue. The principle behind the Sunday morning family tree workshops are to give you the chance to ask that one question that, if you could get an answer for it, would move your genealogy and your family history research one step further back or off in the direction that is of greatest interest to you.
I have a question. We spoke on the phone, and I told you my situation of my mother being an orphan and one of 4 sisters. And when her older sister, who was 2 years older, got married, she married this gentleman on the condition that he would take in her 3 sisters. And she was born in England. And that's as far as I've gotten. So I would like to know if people get any information from the boats that people came over on.
There are a couple of problems when it comes to the passenger arrival lists in Canada. First of all, they are not indexed up until, I think, 1924. So that means that you have to wade through film after film, particularly if you don't know either the month or the year that they arrived. Then there's another question that comes up, and that is, did they arrive in Canada or at an American port? There's so much to learn about your family's roots. But one of the remarkable things about the interest in genealogy is that it is fed with these incredible breakthroughs and getting to meet people who you would never have otherwise met. You're constantly looking for clues, you're putting pieces of information together, and you're coming up with discoveries. And I tell everybody that it's the most fun you can have sitting down. When I first came to the library, I knew nothing about Jewish genealogy. And every scrap of paper, every book had something in there for me because it was a learning experience. It has such a large collection of Yizkor books, one of the largest collections in the world, the books of remembrance, the books of the destroyed communities. And these books are a wonderful source of information about life in the town, pictures of the town, books that give you a historical perspective on the towns in which your family lived. On November the 11th, 1939, the last remaining Jews of Ostrow Mazowiecka, my family's town, were marched from the town, 600 of them, into the forest. They were forced to dig a huge grave, and they were all executed. The German army recorded the whole event. One picture, labeled in German, says, "The last Jew of Ostrow Mazowiecka." And the last photograph that you see is the pit full of bodies. That particular event has been memorialized in Ostrava. There was a monument put up. Regrettably, it has been torn down by vandals. At the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw, I found the sign that the German army put up on the walls in Ostrava to announce that the Jews were being punished for setting fire to the town. Of course, this particular fire was set by the Germans as an excuse to drive the remaining Jews out of the town. All of us who've been involved in the various projects that have taken place over the last number of years and that continue to take place, we all feel very comfortable that the work has been solidified and that when we pass on, the information will be available to generations. My brother saved my life, and I will be forever indebted to him for that. It all stems back to about 12 months ago when my late brother Arthur Diamond died. And after the mourning period, we walk around the block. That's a tradition in Jewish life. Unfortunately, it was minus 30 degrees in the middle of January, and I got halfway around the block and lost all strength. And shortly thereafter, I found myself in the hospital and learned that I had very serious blockage, and that resulted in the heart bypass operation. In the end, really, it turned out that going through what I've gone through, I've learned to pace myself more, to slow myself down, to try to get more sleep, which isn't always easy when there's so much going on, but to take a different viewpoint on life, and I certainly have as a result of his influence on my life and influence that he's had on me. Yeah, my brother saved my life. People often say I'm consumed by what I'm doing. To some extent, that's true. And I say to some extent because when you are enjoying something as much as I am enjoying what I'm doing, I can't call that consumed. I call that having fun. I come from a family that never sat around. That's in our genes. Beta thalassemia may run through my veins, but working and being active is first nature to my family. So when people say to me, what drives you or what keeps you going or are you bored? Never. We're at the Eternal Garden Cemetery just outside of Montreal. And I come from time to time to visit the graves of my parents, my brother, my grandmother, and to honor them. It's also a great time for memories because things come rushing back when you're here at the cemetery. This is my father's grave. You'll notice it's on the aisle of the cemetery. My father always sat on the aisle. Whether it was the synagogue or the theater, he always wanted to have seats on the aisle, and he insisted when he was buried to be buried on the aisle. In Jewish tradition, when you visit the cemetery, you leave a stone on the grave of those who you're visiting to let them know you were here and to honor them. It's a great time to remember some of the wonderful things that happened in my life and associating with them. Being a genealogist, being a family historian, is like being a detective. You come across wonderful sources of information, people who have put together their own family trees and along the way have become expert. You tap their knowledge. Hey there, folks. The research circle is a concept where everybody is equal. We all sit around in a circle. Everybody tells their breakthrough in the last year and tries to give an idea of what they would like to accomplish in the year to come. First of all, I want to say thank you for coming out in the snowstorm. Good old Montreal.
Stan is an amazing individual. There's not a question that you can stump him with. The man just has an ability to take a difficult challenge and bring it down to basic roots and show you the way to go, and he's always there for you. And just an incredible individual.
Hi. I'm Susan Scholman, and my grandparents came to Montreal in 1900, 1902, and 1906, and 1908. That much I could tell you. What I'd like to do is just read one of the passages from my book, and it's this, which is from my painting called Hi, My Name is Jaime Silverman. 5 years ago, I received a bag of letters that my aunt left me before she passed away, and when I opened them up, I realized that they were letters from 1899 to 1902, written from my grandparents, and decided I would start painting a series of paintings dedicated to my ancestors. And that's when I contacted Stanley and said, you know, did you ever hear this place, that place? And I just started doing this research under his supervision in the sense of giving me some clues, and found a lot of documents, went to cemeteries. I mean, I did a 5-year search, and I think that's what genealogy is all about, is making that leap and finding out about it and learning about what was before it that one never knew.
In the tradition of Judaism, we are a family. We try to reach out to family. And one of the important reasons for Jewish genealogy is to find your family, to find out who they are. The fact that the Jews of the world have emigrated to many different corners means that finding your family takes on a different kind of responsibility. And here in the Jewish community of Montreal, we have a very interested group of Jewish genealogists who are trying to find their family history.
It's not exactly somewhat obsessed. I'd say he's totally obsessed, but in a very, very constructive way. He's done a beautiful investigation into our past, and he's found out people from 200 years ago in strange places I never knew about. It's a form of a mystery, and that to me is what it's about. It's a wonderful exploration and a bringing of people together who otherwise never would have been together.
This gave him not so much an interest as a passion, and he threw himself into it with his whole being, and he will probably work on this for as long as he lives.
The most important thing anybody interested in genealogy can possibly remember is to interview their living relatives now. If you end up with 2 words, if only I had done that. In my case, if only I had interviewed my grandmother who lived to be 103 years old. It turned out that I spent 10 years looking for the information she could probably have given me in a half an hour. For me, this has been a wonderful, wonderful adventure, and I hope it never ends.